You are now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation. Coming up today.
I'm married to someone who doesn't believe in collaboration. However, we're married. And one might say that that was a collaboration. I think how he talked me into having a baby was, he said, because I was really on the fence about it, because I think in my mind, I knew it was going to be a lot of work. I tend to shy away from work. He was like, Carissa, it will be our greatest collaboration if we have a baby. And I was like, okay, I'll do it.
This is Radio Juxtapoz.
What is up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Radio Juxtapoz podcast. And I know we are mostly used to Doug's wonderful Scottish accent to kick off these podcasts today. You have me, Evan Pricco, doing the introduction for what I like to call the unexpected podcast. I had planned to talk to my friend, people I've loved, Carissa Potter, for a long time in a more recorded interview format, and we hadn't done it, even though we'd been working together for the past, 12 months now that we've been in the pandemic. And even though we live about 10 miles away from each other, we actually haven't physically seen each other. We've only been Zooming, voice calling, all the things that we've kind of grown accustomed to now in this new world. But seeing that her art career and her brand, People I've Loved, is so centered around connections with other people, the loss of connection, the longing for connection, it seemed like it was the appropriate time to have a conversation with her about a year into what is our new life. What I've always appreciated about Carissa's work is this vulnerability, this actual openness to feel upset or to feel confused or to ask for connection. Something that you don't necessarily see that much in the contemporary art world, but what she has been able to do with her career is turn that emotional release and that need for emotional connection into not only a brand that we've come to recognize, but also a painting and fine art career that is exceeded what I even feel as the expectations for art. The reason why I wanted to talk to Carissa today, of all days, was I'm so curious about the connection that we feel with art, but also the conversations that we have around art in regards to vulnerability. And one of the things that she does so well with her art is she explains it, she shows you, she writes the words out, and these words carry such a heavy meaning that that I think we all can relate, and I think we all need to relate. The initial reason I was talking to Carissa was because Juxtapoz had a print release with her a few weeks back, but what ended up happening in this conversation is it dawned on me that she's so eloquent and so passionate about the subjects that she works with, and it seemed like it was something that I wanted to document further. She and I have been working on this project, If You Were Here Now, for the past year, that was sort of putting into context and perhaps a more interview and video format some of these conversations that she's been having with her artwork, but also keeping creative people connected during a time when we were sort of uncertain about what our creative professional careers were going to lead to. And also, I love speaking with Carissa. I love getting advice from her. I love the fact that she asks me the hard questions that I don't even ask myself when I'm working. So I hope that this podcast conversation is helpful in a way, but also just watching and listening to a person who is doing a lot of the hard work in terms of not only herself, but also helping us get through what has been one of the most chaotic and crazy periods that we've all lived through. This is fun because I feel like I never get to do these conversations with somebody I have a little bit of a background with.
I feel like you have a background with everybody, though.
No. This is we've kind of gone through this year together in a weird way.
actually, in a weird way, it's true, because we like didn't know each other at all prior to 2020. And then when everything hit, we just happened to be in the right place at the right time to like know each other or have someone, this connective person in both of our lives that kind of like we both rely on heavily.
It's funny. I woke up this morning feeling like a sense of relief that, you know, I don't want to say that like the last 4 years have been, there's been a lot of great things that have happened in my life in the last 4 years, but also just there's like this little bit of anxiety that's kind of gone now. And I know it's like, I don't want to mention him by name, but there is something kind of just like, oh, I don't have to it's not happening anymore. At least he's not in charge anymore. I mean, yeah, it's true. This morning we were talking about being cautiously optimistic for the future again, which is kind of like a new thing, and who knows what that will actually look like. But I have to say, I was like readily addicted to my news feed, seeing what stupid thing this person had done every 20 minutes. And now that it's not my news feed anymore, it's kind of great. I thought I'd miss it. But actually, I don't. Like, I'm totally fine with not seeing Anderson Cooper for a minute. I'm totally fine.
I don't know. I like Anderson Cooper.
Well, I know. I do too. Well, I also woke up with Michael Bolton's How Am I Supposed to Live Without You in my head this morning. So, I don't know.
So why do you feel like you have Michael Bolton going on?
Well, my buddy Nissan did send me a Michael Bolton song the other day, and was like, hey, this song kind of bangs. And I was like, it kind of does. It wasn't that song. It was another Michael Bolton song I can't think of right now. But now I have Michael Bolton stuck in my head the last like 3 or 4 days.
I think we should run with it.
You know, but actually, I think like even if you were a Trump supporter, I still think they might feel a sense of relief too. And they won't admit it, but even their anxiety level is probably going to drop a little bit.
So why do you say that?
Because I think, and I know we're going to talk about art at some point, but I think he had a bigger pull on people's emotions than they even cared to admit. Because I think that a lot of people didn't realize that they had this power to say offensive things to people and be mean to people so vocally and openly. And I think that actually gave people extra sense of anxiety and power that I think maybe they'll feel happy that they don't have that everyday anger being built up. I
don't know. You might be right. You might be wrong. I think that for me, just to push back on that, it's unfortunate that I don't know, I'm not in close contact with a lot of people who supported Trump because I live in the Bay Area. I think that for them, I would presume that they're feeling how we felt when he was elected. And that was not, there was a daily the other day that interviewed people who had gone to the Capitol on the 6th. And we're talking about how they were like really afraid of socialism and communism and all of the like horrible things that the Biden-Harris sort of presidency would look like. And so I think that maybe raises their anxiety. I don't know. Why are people afraid of socialism again?
I don't know. It was drilled into our heads as kids. I mean, you grew up in Minnesota. I grew up here, and I grew up in Oakland, California. I feel like no matter where you grew up in the United States, we were beat over the head that socialism was just the worst thing, right? I mean, I feel like, isn't that kind of a collective thing that we all went through? I
don't know. I didn't feel that way. I don't think I got that. No, Minnesota is actually quite socialist in its thinking. So I never really got that. I never really got that beat into my head about that it was bad.
Oh, that's interesting because Minnesota has so many Scandinavian like connections.
We're a large part Scandinavian and German. It's definitely shifting, but which is good. It's becoming more diverse, obviously. I think growing up, we thought, why wouldn't you take care of like our collective good? Also, I think extreme climates, like we needed each other in a way that maybe other climates didn't. It's hard because like you don't have that same sort of commitment in places like Detroit. It's got a little bit of a different ethos. I feel like when I think about Detroit, I think about like a a bit more capitalism and like innovation and cars for whatever that's worth, maybe.
Do you think that, like, because I feel like the Bay Area people are very sheltered off emotionally. Do you agree with that?
Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Okay, so I feel like because there's very few natives here, I'm going on third generation here. I think because there's so many transplants, I feel like the mishmash sort of led a lot of people to be maybe socially progressive, but also a little standoffish. Like, I feel like we have more connected with New York than we do Los Angeles.
That might be true. I don't know though. I feel like I grew up, my extended family's from Los Angeles, and I feel like I grew up really, like, not necessarily not in line with the culture, but I didn't feel like my opinion was appreciated there, or like I didn't feel like I fit in there. But I realized that, like, LA is just so massive, you just have to find the right spot. Whereas I feel it must be similarly to New York. Maybe. I don't know. I wish I could give you a hard answer on that. I do feel like when you get to the Bay Area, you're right, we're all a lot of transplants. And finding a community is really important, essential to, like, getting through. I feel like I don't know how people will do it without school, or like, I feel really fortunate to have been able to do it in person.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. I mean, I've actually been meaning to ask you this. Like, if you were to be somebody coming out of art school now, could you be making the art that you're making now?
Yes.
Okay, explain.
Well, I feel really lucky that the sort of topic of choice for me of like the human condition and what sort of connects us is pretty with us. Like, I don't think it's gonna like go out of style, if that makes sense. My work or the things that I make may go out of style, but like the fascination with humans and what our place is on this planet, I think is everlasting. I think, like, for me, you would just find different mediums to do it. Like, for example, when I started out making zines because we were doing everything in person, and there was a tactile quality. I mean, I'm sure everybody loves books. They feel good in your hands. They weigh things down.
Paper's great.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
But now I think, like, for me, a lot of my practice, if you can call it a practice, has transferred to, like, online content. And so I think you absolutely could do the same now as what I've been working on. And unless I misunderstood your question.
With People I've Loved, let's start with People I've Loved. You are able to be, I assume those things that you're writing are coming from you and your feelings. They're not just like found, it's not like found feelings. You know what I mean? Like, they're personal feelings, correct?
I think I would say like 90% are.
Okay.
I think that how I want to push back on that is that I don't think that humans are that individual as they like to think that they are, or I like to think that I am. So it's hard for me to really establish the boundaries of where my experience and other people's experiences. So, like, I may feel like they may come from my life, but I don't know. Is it like something that I was helping my friend go through? Is it something that, like, I was feeling because I read a news article about it and it really, like, resonated with me? Or was it actually something that, like, happened to me? It's also like, okay, so did I read that news article 4 years ago and now finally settling, I'm, like, seeing it in my life and then I just don't know. I like thinking about them, and I do think about them realistically as collaborations. I'm just not always sure of, like, the different sort of ingredients that go into it. My practice is not such that I, like, find a story and try to translate it from somebody else's. It just sort of happens naturally.
This is interesting because I think you're saying something that I didn't quite realize until just now. It's very hard for people to articulate their feelings, especially it's hard for people to articulate simply their feelings when, like, things aren't going well. And a lot of people feel like maybe too vulnerable by doing that. but you have kind of, I feel like your work, you kind of are allowing people to have those moments where like, hey, like longing is okay, or, just having feelings in public are okay, and like in expressing them. Like, so maybe that actually is something I didn't really think that you kind of are helping even your friends kind of deal with certain kind of life situations that are coming up, but especially like in the last year, how needed that is.
That's very flattering. I hope that anything that I do might make it easier for people to kind of be comfortable in their own skin. Going back to kind of the, like, I don't understand why people are so afraid of socialism, when I don't really understand why people are so afraid of being vulnerable. What's going to happen? People aren't going to leave you? Well, they probably shouldn't have been with you anyway. Do
you think it's the limits of, do you think it is the way that maybe we were raised in America a little bit, like where emotions and feelings, like some families do it really well and others just don't do it?
I don't know. I mean, probably. I also think it's a gender thing. Like, I think, no offense to people who identify as male, but I feel like you've been really limited by how and when it's appropriate to express your emotions or feel them. Like, you're pretty much only allowed anger.
Anger and frustration, really. Yeah. And even frustration is something that's a little bit on the fine line for if people could see me quoting men, like there's this sort of frustration is something like you're not supposed to have frustration, you're supposed to figure it out, that kind of thing. So I don't know.
So do you feel like now as an adult, do you think it's beneficial for you to access a wider range of emotions?
Absolutely. But I also think that as somebody, like when I was 18 and I would read Catcher in the Rye, let's just use that as an example. I'm just thinking of some book that I've read in the last 5 years that I reread. I think my emotions when I was 18, I think as a mid 30-year-old, I think your feelings evolve and you can actually find new avenues to tap into kind of like what you actually feel. And I think I'm happier now as an emotional 39-year-old than I ever would have been as an emotional 18.
Which is cool. It's like everybody should look forward to getting older because you're kind of learning to cope with life. You actually have skills. Or, I guess.
When was the first time Carissa Potter put text next to a drawing and the balance worked as an artist?
Ooh, no one's ever asked me that. And
really?
No.
I was worried that was going to be the question. Like people have said so many times to you, but like I think there's something so unique about putting text with artwork, and you do it so well. But it's the balance and the composition where you're like, hey, this actually can work as something.
I think probably like high school art class of like.
Oh, okay, it goes that far back. Okay, cool. I love it.
Well, it's weird to think like. I don't know if other people can relate to this, that they've been sort of like working on the same project. If you like just go back far enough, like I have like different ways of sort of containing it, or categorizing it, thinking it's new and finding exciting new sort of elements to it. But it's actually the same thing since high school. And so I look back on like, when you like go to your like parents' or grandparents' house and you go through like the old boxes of drawings that they've saved of yours from high school, and you're like, oh my God, this is so horrible. I can't believe I did this and was so excited about it. But it's actually having the same conversation just over and over and over and over again. And you'd think I'd be sick of it now, but I'm not.
I love it.
I've never been very talented in terms of like rendering or drawing, which is to say, it's funny that I do it all the time. I think.
But that's like a comparison. Like that's like that kind of, I don't know. Like that's such a different, a technical like, I don't know, maybe a technical skill. I don't know. It's kind of it's a weird thing because in Juxtapoz, there's always this thing about like the technical application of like how you can paint and stuff and illustration like skills where it's so honed in. But like there's also I don't know. I just think there's there's two different worlds, I guess.
Maybe. And I think that if I was going to say that a strength that I have is sort of combining the sort of words and composition to kind of convey the most meaning in the most immediate way. But I think it's like, it takes a while to really think about it. Sometimes they come like really easily, and other times I have to really like sit with a feeling to kind of go through it in my head and dissect it and find out, like, keep asking myself why over and over again. Like, why do you feel this way? And what are your motivations? And yada, yada, yada. It really depends on the day. I wish I could come up with a formula for like, oh, write one sentence and then draw one thing and then it just poof happens, but it just doesn't. I'm really envious of people who have technical skills, like really envious.
Do you go into modes? Like, do you go into Carissa Potter artist mode and people I've loved mode, or do they just blend all the time and you kind of can find, because when you do an art show, it's Carissa Potter, but when you do certain things for your business, it's people I've loved, correct? Is there two brains, or is it just, it's one Carissa Potter brain?
So I think it's easier for people. It is one brain. I don't think, okay. But it's actually one of many brains. It just has my name attached to it. I think it's easier for people to understand. Having communication, I feel like, is so hard and complicated. I think understanding categories and how they sort of work as systems of communication is helpful. Like when you sit next to someone on a plane, if you ever go on a plane again and you have to like describe to them what you do, like it's a lot easier to just say, oh, I'm a pediatrician, but I can't say that because that would be a lie. But I might say that.
We're gonna go back to that actually in a second.
I don't know how to easily translate what I do so people can understand it, and then if they connect to it, great. If they don't, they don't. But I think as I keep going, I really don't see any differences. Maybe there's a difference in presentation or the use of words or the lack of use of words. But I think those are just kind of like coincidental.
When you moved to the Bay Area, it was for art school?
Yeah, I went to SFAI a million years ago. Maybe not a million.
Not a million years ago. But what was SFAI is like, it's a pretty heavy on the conceptual. I feel like maybe I'm reading that wrong. It has a very rich tradition, incredible alumni. What did you go in to school thinking was going to happen? Oh,
that I would immediately find a blue chip gallery that would represent me and I would never have to work again because I was so brilliant and the whole world would fall at my fingertips. You don't know how to respond to that.
There's no pressure then.
Oh, I also want to mention in that equation that I would do absolutely no work.
Got it. You would just sit in the studio all day long, paint, make a bunch of money, and just...
Oh, I wouldn't even paint. I wouldn't even make anything. I would just sit there.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you went into school with no pressure, just everything was going to work out. What did you go for?
I went for print, and I want to sort of clarify what I meant a little bit. I just think that, like, nobody talks about, or, like, maybe I just didn't want to listen to the, like, hard work part of it, or the, like, extreme exhaustion, or the, like, I think the fight. Maybe they do talk about it, and I just didn't want to hear it, because I was so seduced by the sort of, like, allure of the, like, successful traditional artist narrative.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about, like, the competitive kind of fight you have to have in this art world, I think, or creative world.
I mean, I flip back and forth from thinking like, oh, it's really competitive, and at my heart, I am really competitive, to the like, it's really, there's a space for everybody, and that you just have to find like the audience that's interested in what you're doing, and that's sort of the tricky part. So I don't really know. I do think I came to the Bay Area mainly because there was a woman I met during my post-bac who I will name. Her name is Pagan Brooke, and she was the first person who I think really asked me in a studio visit what I wanted to do or what I wanted to say. And it seems so simple now, but it really had a profound effect on me. And she taught at SFAI. And I only got into 2 grad schools. And SFAI, I think living in the Bay Area is a seductive thing. And anyone who's ever been to SFAI, I feel like will have to agree, the campus is stunning. It's just like a really inspiring environment. And I also, piggybacking off what you said, I was interested in more conceptual projects, even though I went to study print. I only got into print programs, so maybe that was another reason. But like, if I think about I didn't know this at the time, but if I think about like sort of the trajectory of like mission school or like the Bay Area figurative or other, like my work is, I feel like, a natural continuation of that conversation in some ways, using text with images in a weird way that I wasn't expecting.
I mean, I think that, first off, I think that what you're doing is a conceptual art project in many ways, but also I'm curious, like, did you have an answer for her, for Peggy Brook, or did you not have an answer and that pushed you?
I don't think I did have, I don't think that question, sorry to be like, I don't think that question is the right question. I think the question for me was, or it wasn't about the answer. It was about that she cared enough to listen.
Yeah, got it. Absolutely.
And
okay.
That made me feel like, okay, I had just been in undergrad, the chair of the art department and in our history department. I really love telling this story. He told me my second year of undergrad that I wasn't talented enough to be a studio art major and I wasn't smart enough to be an art history major. So I had to find a different department. And it was crushing because I was like, and so I became a women's and gender studies major. They were like, come hang out, be with us. Let's talk about whatever you want. I was really, that was really exciting too. I also think I found an advisor there who is very much like, oh, you wanna do this research, you wanna make this happen, I'm gonna help you make this happen, which I feel like is what faculty should do. And she was great. Her name was Kristen Maple Bloomberg. Shout out to Kristen.
Wow, I hope she listens. That's awesome.
I think like that I am definitely attracted to environments that sort of are kind and foster and recognize sort of people. And the art department at the time didn't. I didn't think like, oh, I should transfer because that would be too much effort. I just switched majors and all's well that ends well.
Are you a good collaborator?
Oh, I don't know. I'm married to someone who doesn't believe in collaboration, doesn't believe it's possible. However, we're married, and one might say that was a collaboration. I think how he talked me into having a baby was, he said, because I was really like on the fence about it, because I think in my mind, I knew it was going to be a lot of work. I tend to shy away from work.
Wait, you keep saying this.
But wait. So he was like, Carissa, it will be our greatest collaboration if we have a baby.
So that's when he used it. Okay.
Right. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, there were lots of conversations, and it took us a really long time to have a baby because it turns out you have to have sex to have a baby. But I'm really happy we did. But collaboration, I think the thing that I really love about collaboration is I get really inspired by people. And so it's fun for me to collaborate and find out different people's styles of working and like interests. It's just exciting. Like it's really boring in my head because I have access to that information all the time. But like when you work with other people, you get to, I mean, there's all these surprises and excitement and you just don't know what to expect. And it's wonderful sometimes. Other times it's hard and it doesn't work. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But I do think that I really am motivated by people, externally motivated. And it's lovely to be able to have other people sort of hold you accountable as well. And other people that you respect. I think I tend to collaborate with people who I really think that they're the bee's knees. People don't say that, but the really, really excited by, which I've been really fortunate to be able to know these people that are really exciting and doing wonderful things that I just want to be a part of.
Have you noticed, and that, especially now that you have a child, your baby's 1 now?
1.5.
1.5, which is 1.5 in other terms. You have a 1.5-year-old. We're going through this kind of time where we're all at home. Have you felt more motivated or less motivated to be a creator, to be posting things on Instagram, to be doing all your work? Like, do you feel more motivated or less motivated? Because I feel more motivated now to do work. It's just a little bit harder sometimes to get my butt moving at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday, but I'm definitely more motivated.
I think it's a mixed bag. And I think it ebbs and flows depending on the world. But on a whole, this is going to sound cheesy, I'm so happy I had a kid. And I'm so happy I have that kid. It's really weird how, like, I mean, I think parents attach to their children no matter what, but you get sort of like, it's special when it's just this like phenomenally illuminating relationship that is far outside of the realm of possibility that I could have had before. And I think like having a child has really like expanded my emotional gamut. It's like, I don't want to say like, oh, I didn't understand life before Margaret, but I kind of didn't. The preciousness of everything and the sort of the finite nature, the fact that it's constantly ending, yet we're fighting so hard to be alive. And I think for me, I've always had sort of issues with depression, and it's nice in some ways, even though it's a lot of work, to have somebody else to live for, or like who really relies on you. I also think it's amazing, like, to see the developmental stages of human beings and to sort of recognize traits that, I don't know, it's for me a mind-bogglingly worthy use of my limited time on this planet.
I love how you described all of that. And was there an ADBC in terms of like, did you ever have a moment where like when you were making work where you're like, oh, that's a new thought. That's a new feeling. I didn't have that before. I didn't have that in my creative toolkit. And now I have this new thing in my creative toolkit that it surprises me.
Oh, 100%. I think like the topics and the themes, I think, are really like enriched by my understanding of what it means to be alive. Not to say that there aren't multiple ways that you could find this. You don't have to have a kid by any means. But I do think like the subject matter, like reading, I think Margaret was really into birds for some reason. So that's how I feel like I got into birds. Like, I wouldn't be into birds if Margaret wasn't into this pigeon that hangs out on the corner.
Well, you poor kids in Minnesota, you had birds for only a couple months a year and it got too cold. So, you know, like, it's a Northern California thing, I think.
But I think like it's really interesting how her interests, I also think my style is probably shifting like in a real way, in that like we have to read a lot of board books and like the illustration styles and how they sort of the narrative structure of a board book and sort of how to tell stories through pictures for people who don't have words yet mastered, I think is definitely sort of inspiring things in ways that I may not be conscious of.
Wow, I didn't even think of that. Is that that's something that is such a skill, is to make those things mean something to somebody who can't express like what, you know, besides a couple like smiles and maybe like a little like shake of the body. But like, It's a skill to be able to communicate that way. And you have that. You're really good at that to begin with. But I can see where that could even strengthen your muscles on that.
So I think I don't know if this is correct or not. Well, thank you, first of all, and I don't know if that's true or not. I am very flattered that you think that I have that skill. But we were talking the other day of like, she might be in this developmental stage where she still doesn't understand that other people don't have access to her thoughts.
Yeah.
Like that. Like she started to sort of get sneaky. Which is exciting because, I mean, for me, sneakiness is like creative right there. Like, and like wants to push up against the boundaries, and that's like exciting, but annoying. But so like, how do we, like, what would it be like if our consciousness were permeable? Like if we could, if everybody could understand everything that was going in our minds. The other thing that's new for her right now, which I think is really interesting, is she's having nightmares for the first time. Which, like, why are we afraid of certain things? And how do those things manifest if you don't have language?
Yeah, well, how do those things manifest if you might not even have enough experience in order to be scared of something?
Absolutely, because you haven't left the house because you've been in a global pandemic your entire life. I don't know. Evan, thank you so much for listening to my child talk.
No, okay, but what you did just then, and this is something that's you got it right into the bulk of it. It's when you're an artist, or even if you're a writer, you're trying to get your thoughts out into the world in a way that people can understand, whatever jumbledness that you're trying to expose your brain a little bit to people. Like, I have the hardest time. Like, I could have the most beautiful sentence in my head, and I can't quite get it out. Like, I still don't have that perfect skill where I can just like get it out perfectly onto the paper, and just, it's like, oh, it's so perfect. I described everything I wanted to describe about that painting. So we're constantly doing that. You're constantly doing that as an artist. You're trying to get as close as you can to your thoughts out into the world. So it must be interesting raising a child and being conscious of the fact that you're trying, like, of that kind of skill, or that kind of the development of like your thoughts and your imagination, and having to, and maybe how that affects you as a maker.
Yeah, it's an exciting ride. I wouldn't, again, without this child, I wouldn't have had the sort of concentration or focus to think about the origins of those sort of lingering needs to try to get out something beautiful, or get out anything from one's head onto the page. And I don't know, Evan, you are a writer. You are a phenomenal writer.
But you know what I mean? It's like that, I assume that William Faulkner sat around with like a big thing of whiskey or whatever, and was trying to get this line out and couldn't get it right. So like I think that's the goal, right? Is to get that perfect sentence, or that perfect painting, or that perfect line out. And I think that's what that drives people to keep doing what they do. I think it also could drive people to depression and mania, which that's possible too.
But I mean, like, do you think in your heart of hearts that exists? Or what? I mean, like,
I do, because I still have these things where I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, that's how I'm going to start my editor's letter. That's exactly how I'm going to start it. I'm going to start it with that line or that feeling. Like, I do that all the time still to this day. I mean, I think I've done almost 200 Juxtapoz magazines, and I have that moment every single time. And that's
amazing. Yeah, I know. It's just like, that's why we do this shit, because of those moments, right. I feel.
Exactly. So when's, like, do you get those every day? Are you kind of that where, oh, I got it, and then you go run off and draw something, or get the sentence out, or how do you do it?
I don't get them every day. I wish I got them every day. I love them.
I wish I did too.
It feels so good. Like that excitement about something. If I could figure out a way to get that every day, I don't know if I need food. I would just live off of it. But it's definitely like a drug to have that inspiration, that sort of catapult of whatever chemicals are going on in my brain. Anyway, but sometimes it's wrong. Like yesterday, and wrong by, I had one yesterday when I was in the shower, and then I posted about it. I didn't describe the moment, but it was about like feeling all of these feelings at the same moment and having this, letting myself feel that way. And I thought, oh my gosh, I feel like this is going to be really resonant with people, like that they just like give themselves permission to feel all of these conflicting emotions and just let it ride. And it didn't work. Like, the text I came up with, it was, I would say, a pretty big failure, but I felt like that way.
Right.
I had that feeling of like excitement and like, okay, these are just the perfect words. This is what I want to hear in this moment. And it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It just wasn't. I think for me, the success of something it's a weighted question of like, does it make people feel something? Am I excited about it and interested in it? I'm sure there are other things too, but I can't think of them.
Does your audience let you fail? Because you have quite a large following on social media. Like, do they appreciate some of the moments that might not work? The ones that you think, oh, that didn't really work. Like, do you think your audience is for like goes along on the journey with you a little bit?
I don't know. I think that's a good question. I think so. Maybe. I think that I'm pretty lucky that I have a pretty forgiving audience, or accepting of failure and misspellings because I can't spell. I also think that there's a certain amount of, like, when you share something that's so close to one's heart, it evokes a certain amount of compassion and understanding naturally, I think. But sometimes it's not always there. Like, I try really hard I read the comments, but I try really hard not to respond to them. I think for MLK Day, there was a pretty long thread about why we couldn't have MLK be, or I posted something likening it with Anne Frank, or that they would be the same age today if they were both alive. And I think people found that insensitive, like that we couldn't just let Martin Luther King have his day. We shouldn't have to compare it to something else. But and I really think that as opposed
to talking about how close history is to our present, kind of like people weren't reading it that way.
I mean, that was how I tried to intend it. I also think that and people might not be able to relate directly to sort of I think that we need these bridges to be able to relate to each other. What I mean is that people understand stories, I think, through their relation to themselves, if that makes sense. Or like the story makes, like, for example, once I had a child, having the children taken away at the border, I don't know if I would have reacted the same way, as I had like a visceral disgust and horror of like parents being separated from their children because I had a child, in a way that I couldn't have understood not having a child. I mean, I still think it was horrible, but it was like a guttural like disgust. So I think like having these connections and understandings, I think, is really important. Or these shared narratives, or understanding narratives through empathy and compassion. That being said, I do think it's also valid that we just focus on Martin Luther King. So I don't know the right answer, and the women.
I don't know if this will. I feel like it was. I think it was a really interesting comparison to talk about how. The Holocaust and a dictator who took over Europe and the civil rights movement were actually really close to each other. And I thought that was actually something that I didn't even thought of. And I thought that was quite remarkable, just to remember how quick history happens, and how like things aren't actually that far apart from each other, and that like we're always going to be a work in progress. I thought it was interesting in that way. I feel like people are just so quick to think the worst of intentions, and that it's really hard these days, I think, to have a good conversation on social media about anything. So it's hard.
I also think, like, I don't know, I feel like the person who was, for me, it's helpful instead of get on the sort of defense mode of thinking right away, like, oh, those weren't my intentions, these were my intentions, but more so to like reframe it like, oh, this person is not hurting, but like advocating for what they need right now, and they need what their needs are to feel recognized and important, and like their experience matters, and how do I give that to them? Like, it's not about me, really.
Right. This is interesting because Juxtapoz I don't have to function in that way with Juxtapoz, but you've kind of, your audience has kind of gone along on this journey with you and these words and these expressions and these feelings that like I think people want. I could see where you have a little bit like a different relationship with your audience than I do with the Juxtapoz audience.
I don't know. I hope that my experiences are relatable to the people who choose to spend their time looking at my work. It's hard for me to conceptualize it in that I spend all my time at my house. I don't leave my house. Like, I don't see anyone. Like, it's really difficult to think like, oh, there are actually other people on the other side of this weird block of a phone that I carry around with me everywhere just in case I miss something. But I think like it's such a crazy thing that we have this ability to connect in a sort of like very surface way to each other, but it's still like keeping us breathing over this distance that we're sort of now facing as a species.
What kind of art moves you?
So that's the thing. I've been really, I've been really into whatever Margaret's into.
That moves you right now.
Yeah. Well, because we can't go to museums, we can't go to art shows.
Of course. Yeah.
So I've been really into whatever she like. She's into birds and horses. I don't know, horses, whatever. Okay. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, horse life. We should really get a horse. Like, I don't know what I do with a horse. I don't know where I keep it, but we should really get a horse. Or like how to create another thought about, like,
pony suffice? You can just get a pony for the front yard.
I mean, I really wanted to get chickens, and it was hardcore vetoed. Because I thought, oh, this will help her understand.
We're not going to name names of who vetoed that, huh?
I mean, there's clearly one person who vetoed it, but I love this person, and I really respect that they have a differing view on the topic of chickens. Or a chicken. Doesn't have to be multiple chickens, just one. But no, we'd have to get two because, they need friends. And we're not going to let them inside the house, I don't think. We're not getting a chicken, unfortunately. Evan, I have therapy in 5 minutes. I see a psychologist.
So this is all right. So here, let's do this then. Because it'll be right around an hour. It'll be perfect. We barely talked about your art, but can we just talk a little, real quick, for 5 minutes about the print that you did for Juxtapoz? Because it's the first print that we've done. It's almost like a still life like this. I'm really excited about doing this with you. Can you talk a little bit about the print, what the show was, where it comes from? Go.
Okay, so it came from a show that I had that just came down in Richmond, Virginia. But the piece itself, the show was called I've Been Waiting So Long for You. And it's sort of about sitting with longing and expectations. And for me, like, what would it feel like, or what would the space be like when we can be together again? And like, what would my perfect person be? And how would we just sit together and let sort of the time pass? And so I think like this particular piece is we kind of have everything we need, but it's just like slightly out of reach. But it's always there for us if we need it. It was originally, I was working on a commission for a writer, and this piece originally came from, it kind of mutated out of that. And it was coupled with some text that she had written, and I'm trying to remember the exact text. I should have come prepared. But it was something like, "We'll try again tomorrow." I really enjoyed that text. It was her text, but I kind of wanted to expand on the poetics of the space and the possibilities of interpretation. So it kind of moved in a different direction. I think for a long time I've been really fascinated with how you can exist in alternative spaces within your mind, and this one is sort of an image that could take you to a place where you would be with someone and you wouldn't feel alone anymore.